Dying billionaire had a contract marriage with a female bodyguard to avenge his daughter. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The fluorescent lights above the private wing of Hale Memorial Hospital hummed softly as Adrian Hale, once the most feared and respected billionaire in the state, stared at the file in his trembling hands. The pages were crisp, heavy, and marked with the cold certainty of his medical reports. Stage 4. Rapid progression. Months left, if he was lucky. He exhaled slowly, the breath shaky, as if leaving his body against his will. Outside the window, the late evening sky of Manhattan glowed with streaks of gold, but the beauty did nothing to warm him. Adrian had built empires, destroyed rivals, and commanded entire markets with a single signature. But none of that mattered now. Not when his life had an expiration date. And not when his daughter's death still screamed in his mind. A knock at the door. Firm. Controlled. Familiar. Adrian lifted his gaze. She stepped in like a shadow sharpening into form, broad shoulders, steady eyes, posture straight as a ruler. Mara Voss, former special protection agent, now an independent bodyguard with a reputation for doing the impossible. She had saved his daughter once. Years before the accident that took her life. Sir, she said, voice low, respectful but not submissive. Your message sounded urgent. Adrian studied her in silence, measuring the weight of the decision he was about to make. The room felt smaller. The oxygen thinner. He motioned for her to sit, but she remained standing, alert, as if ready to intercept a threat at any second. He admired that. He needed that. Mara, he began, his voice rough, I will not waste time. I have very little left. Her expression shifted, barely, but enough for him to see the flicker of concern. I received my final prognosis, he continued. Months. Maybe less. She inhaled sharply, but said nothing. Adrian pushed a thin folder across the table. She glanced down, her eyes narrowing at the contents, documents, photographs, a grotesque image of twisted metal from the crash, and a page marked tampered break line. Her jaw clenched. You were right, Adrian said. My daughter was murdered. The room stilled. Even the machine seemed to hold their breath. Who? Mara asked, her voice now coated in steel. Adrian let a mirthless smile curve his lips. Everyone who stood to gain is protected. Shielded by power, money, and legal walls I can no longer tear down. He paused. But you can. She looked up sharply. What are you asking of me? Adrian reached into a drawer, pulled out a small velvet box, and set it on the table between them. A ring. Simple. Silent. A promise of a war about to begin. Mara Voss, he said quietly, marry me. Her breath halted. This is a contract, he continued. A legal alliance. A shield. A weapon. With my name, you gain access. With your skill, you finish what I no longer can. We expose them. Every last one. She stared at him, stunned, not by the marriage proposal, but by the raw desperation behind it. You want me to pretend to be your wife, she said slowly, so I can avenge your daughter. I want justice, Adrian whispered. And I trust no one else to carry it out. For a moment, neither moved. Mara looked down at the ring again. She had fought in deserts, guarded diplomats, survived enemy fire. But nothing about this felt like duty. It felt like stepping into a burning building barefoot. Still, she understood grief. She understood honor. And she did not look away. Tell me the terms, she finally said. Adrian's eyes softened with the first hint of hope he had felt in months. "Good," he murmured. "Then let us begin." Adrian watched Mara close the folder and lower herself slowly into the chair across from him. The silence that followed was not awkward. It was heavy, concentrated, like both of them understood that the moment they spoke again, nothing in their lives would remain the same. Mara rested her elbows on her knees, hands clasped. "If I say yes," she said, "I want to know exactly what I am stepping into. Who killed your daughter? Who benefits? Who is protected?" Adrian's eyes darkened. "Marcus Crowe. My former partner. He wanted my daughter gone because she discovered financial crimes hidden in their joint venture. She planned to expose him." His voice cracked for only a second. "And she trusted me to protect her. But I did not see the enemy standing beside me." Mara absorbed that quietly. She had known pain, but not like this. Not the kind that carved itself into a parent's soul. "And why marriage?" she pressed. "You have investigators, lawyers, security teams. You have the Federal Bureau of Investigation on speed dial." Adrian let out a breath that was almost a laugh but lacked any humor. "Those people are compromised. Half of them owe Marcus favors. The other half are terrified of him." He lifted his gaze to hers. "But you do not owe anyone. You cannot be bought. You cannot be intimidated. And as my wife, every barrier that protects Marcus becomes a door you have the legal right to open." The logic was brutal. But it made sense. Mara leaned back, eyes scanning the documents again. "If I agree, people will assume I am after your money." "Let them," Adrian said. "The louder they talk, the easier it is for us to move behind the noise." It was the most Adrian Hale sentence she had ever heard. Cold. Calculated. And yet driven entirely by love for his daughter. A nurse entered briefly to check Adrian's vitals, giving Mara a curious glance before slipping out. Adrian waited until the door clicked shut before continuing. "There is more," he said. He pulled out a second envelope and placed it on the table. Mara hesitated, then opened it. Inside were medical bills. Her mother's. The ones Mara had been drowning under for years. Her eyes snapped up. "How did you get these?" "I wanted to understand the burden you carry," Adrian said. "I am not offering this marriage to control you. I am offering it because I know you need a way out, just as much as I need justice." He paused. "And because my daughter trusted you more than anyone else in her life." The words landed deeper than he expected. Mara's throat tightened, just slightly. Adrian continued, "If you accept, I will clear the debt today. Your mother will receive long-term care. You will receive full security clearance, access to all Hale Corporation files, and every resource you need to expose Marcus Crowe." Mara took a slow breath. "And what do you want from me personally?" Adrian met her eyes without hesitation. "Your loyalty. Your strength. And the truth, even when it hurts." The clock on the wall ticked sharply, marking the seconds as Mara weighed everything. The future. The danger. The opportunity to avenge a girl she once swore to protect. Finally, she pushed the medical files aside and stood. "Adrian," she said firmly, "I will do it. I will be your wife." He closed his eyes for a moment, as if absorbing both relief and pain. Mara extended her hand. "Then give me the terms," she said. "And let us finish what your daughter started." The conference room on the top floor of Hale Memorial Hospital felt colder than the rest of the building. Not because of the air conditioning, but because of the weight of what was about to happen. A marriage contract was not supposed to be signed beside heart monitors and a palliative care nurse's station, but nothing about Adrian Hale's life was normal anymore. A legal team of two quietly arranged papers on the polished table while Adrian sat straighter in his wheelchair, his illness sharpening the lines on his face. Mara stood near the window, her posture perfectly still, like a soldier mentally stepping across a battlefield. The city lights behind her cast a faint glow along her silhouette. Adrian nodded to the attorneys. Begin. The older attorney cleared his throat and opened the document. This contract outlines the conditions of a temporary marital union between Adrian Hale and Mara Voss. Both parties agree to the terms voluntarily. Mara stepped forward. Her eyes scanned the first page, then the next. No emotional vows. No romantic illusions. Only rules, boundaries, and consequences. The attorney continued reading. Clause 1. The marriage will remain a legal partnership for a minimum duration of 6 months or until the investigation into the death of Elara Hale is completed. Mara looked up at Adrian. 6 months, she repeated, steady. Understood. Clause 2. The attorney went on, both parties will maintain separate living quarters within Hale Tower's private residence. No physical relationship is expected or obligated. Adrian's voice cut in softly, your comfort comes first. Always. Mara gave a short nod. Clause 3, the attorney read, Mara Voss will accompany Adrian Hale to 5 public or corporate events as his wife, to establish legitimacy of the union. Mara raised an eyebrow. 5. Crow will be watching, Adrian said. He needs to believe you are permanently at my side. The attorney flipped a page. Clause 4, in the event of Adrian Hale's death, Mara Voss will receive a predetermined financial settlement, as well as full legal immunity for actions taken during the investigation, provided they were within the scope of the contract. Mara's expression did not change, but her fingers curled slightly at her side. I am not doing this for the money. I know, Adrian said quietly. But I want to leave you protected. My daughter would have wanted that. The final clause was read aloud, each word hitting the table like a quiet warning. Clause 5, neither party may terminate the marriage until the agreed objectives are achieved. Breaking the contract early requires mutual consent. There was no turning back once they signed. The attorney placed 2 pens on the table. Shall we proceed? Adrian reached first. His hand shook, but not from doubt. He signed with a deliberate movement, every letter pressed into the paper with the weight of a dying father seeking justice. Then it was Mara's turn. She took the pen, inhaled slowly, and signed her name with a firm, controlled stroke. The moment the ink dried, the room changed. The air changed. Their lives changed. Adrian closed the contract folder and looked at her as if seeing the beginning of something neither of them had planned. It is done, he said. Mara straightened, shoulders square. What happens now? Adrian held her gaze. Now, he said, we make the world believe you are Mrs. Hale. And for the first time since his diagnosis, there was something in his voice that almost sounded like strength returning. The next 72 hours unfolded in a blur of transformation. Mara Voss had been many things in her life, soldier, agent, protector, but she had never been prepared to become the public image of a billionaire's wife. Hale Tower buzzed with activity the moment Adrian was discharged from the hospital and returned to his penthouse. Staff moved with precision, stylists and consultants rotated in shifts, and for the first time, Mara found herself at the center of a world she had only observed from the outside. A soft knock came at her temporary suite's door. When she opened it, a stylist team stood waiting with rolling racks of gowns, shoes, and jewelry that gleamed beneath the overhead lights. Mrs. Hale, the lead stylist, greeted her with a practiced smile. We will begin with posture and presence, then wardrobe fittings. You have a public event in 3 days. Mara almost corrected the title, but she stopped herself. This was the role she had chosen. Lead the way, she said. The training began immediately. She stood in front of a tall mirror while a former pageant coach adjusted her shoulders. Relax the jaw. Lift the chin. You are confident. You are untouchable. You are a Hale now. Mara sighed. I am still me. We want that, the coach replied. Just a version of you that the upper echelon cannot tear apart. The next segment was etiquette. A formal dining setup stretched across a long table, complete with crystal glasses and silver utensils. The etiquette instructor's voice carried a patient authority as she explained each placement. "This is overwhelming," Mara muttered as she accidentally grabbed the wrong fork for the third time. The instructor smiled politely. "You will get there. Think of it as strategic training." Mara could not help a small laugh. At least strategy is familiar. Hours passed. She practiced walking in heels that felt like balancing on toothpicks. She learned how to stand beside Adrian without looking like a bodyguard or a soldier. She memorized names of corporate allies and potential enemies. She repeated phrases carefully crafted to make her appear warm, sophisticated, and approachable, while still maintaining authority. Later that evening, when the stylists finally stepped out, Mara sank onto the edge of the bed, exhausted. She was still catching her breath when she heard a soft knock. Adrian stood in the doorway, leaning lightly on his cane. He looked pale, but steadier than he had at the hospital. "May I?" he asked. Mara nodded, and he stepped inside. He glanced at the scattered wardrobe pieces. "I imagine today was not easy." "No," she admitted honestly. "But I am learning." Adrian lowered himself into the armchair. "I watched you during the sessions. You adapt quickly. Faster than anyone I have ever seen." Mara shrugged. "Adaptation is a survival skill." His gaze softened. "You do not have to be perfect, Mara. You only have to be believable. You only have to stand beside me." She held his eyes. "I will." For a moment, the room felt still. Calm. Almost safe. Adrian leaned back. "The gala in 3 days is important. Marcus Crowe will be there. His people will be watching. This will be your first test." Mara straightened, the soldier inside her awakening. "Then I will be ready." Adrian gave a faint smile. "I never doubted that." As he slowly rose from the chair, his hand brushed the edge of a gown laid out on the bed. For a second, he paused, looking at the deep emerald color. "This one suits you," he said quietly. Mara felt her chest tighten in a way she did not expect. When the door finally closed behind him, she looked at her reflection again. Not the soldier. Not the agent. The woman who would walk into a room on the arm of a dying billionaire. And the woman who would help him finish a war he could no longer fight. The night of the gala arrived with the kind of tension that pressed against Mara's ribs like armor that had been strapped on too tight. Hale Tower's private residence buzzed with quiet efficiency as staff prepared the final details. Downstairs, the world was already gathering, politicians, investors, industry leaders, donors, and every powerful ally or enemy Adrian Hale had accumulated over a lifetime. Mara stood before the mirror, wearing the deep emerald gown Adrian had quietly chosen. It fit her with a precision that felt intentional, almost symbolic. Her hair was swept into a clean, elegant style, and subtle makeup softened the sharp lines of her features without hiding the steel in her eyes. She heard a firm knock. When she opened the door, Adrian was there, dressed in a tailored black suit that concealed the weakness in his body better than the hospital gown ever could. He leaned slightly on his cane, but his gaze was steady, focused. For a moment, he simply looked at her. "You look prepared," he said. Mara nodded. "I am." The elevator ride down felt impossibly slow. As the doors opened into the grand ballroom, a wave of light, music, and murmured conversation washed over them. Flash photography flickered like lightning, and the hum of whispers swelled when the crowd saw the two of them arm in arm. "Stay close," Adrian murmured. "Always," she replied. The cameras clicked louder as they stepped forward together. The jaws of several reporters dropped. Adrian Hale, once widowed, always private, had not been seen with a woman in years. And certainly not one like Mara, whose strength radiated through every measured step. A journalist pushed forward. "Mr. Hale, is this your new wife?" Adrian did not break stride. "Yes. And that is all I will say on the matter." The crowd erupted. Questions flew through the air, blending with the orchestral music. Mara stayed steady, remembering every instruction from her training: lift the chin, soft smile, eyes focused but warm. She matched Adrian's pace, guiding him subtly when he shifted his weight. They reached the center of the ballroom, where corporate leaders and high-ranking officials gathered around crystal tables. And near the far corner, with a glass of champagne held loosely in his hand, stood Marcus Crowe. His smile froze when he saw them. Mara felt him before she fully saw him. The man radiated arrogance wrapped in expensive fabric. His gaze darted to Adrian, then to her, and something ugly flickered in his eyes. Adrian leaned slightly toward her. "This is it. The first test." Marcus approached with a lazy swagger, the kind that came from believing he owned every room he walked into. "Adrian," he said, voice dripping with false warmth. "I did not expect to see you tonight. You look alive." Adrian gave a polite, icy smile. "Marcus." Marcus turned to Mara, letting his gaze linger longer than it should have. "And who might this be?" "Your caretaker." The insult was sharp, crafted to provoke. Mara remained perfectly calm. "I am Mara Hale," she said clearly. "His wife." The words cut the air cleanly. Gasps rippled. Cameras began turning in their direction again. Marcus's smile twitched. "Wife? That is quite sudden, considering Adrian's condition." Mara stepped closer, positioning herself just slightly between the two men. "Sudden does not mean insincere," she said. "But then again, sincerity is not something you would be familiar with, is it?" A low murmur swept the nearby tables. Marcus's expression hardened, but he forced a laugh. "Feisty. I see Adrian has upgraded his security detail." Mara did not blink. Actually, he upgraded his life. For the first time, Marcus's mask slipped. Adrian placed a gentle hand on Mara's arm. Not to stop her. Just to let her know he was there. "You will not intimidate her," he said quietly. "And you will not intimidate me." Marcus lifted his glass in a mocking toast before walking away, but the tightness in his shoulders betrayed him. As he disappeared into the crowd, Adrian exhaled, the tension easing slightly. "You handled that flawlessly," he said. Mara kept her eyes focused on the room, scanning for threats. "I was trained to deal with men like him," she replied. Adrian's voice softened. "Perhaps. But tonight, you did more than that." She turned to him. "You stood with me." In that moment, surrounded by wealth, danger, and hidden agendas, a quiet understanding passed between them. The contract had brought them here. But what kept them steady, side by side, was something deeper. Something neither of them was ready to name. The gala continued around them with glittering confidence, but the energy inside Adrian's private limousine later that night felt entirely different. Once the doors closed and the tinted windows sealed them away from the cameras, the silence between them was no longer strategic. It was heavy with everything they could not say inside the ballroom. Adrian leaned back against the seat, loosening his tie with a shaky hand. The exertion of the evening had taken its toll. His skin looked paler, his breathing slower. Mara watched him carefully, her instincts sharper than ever. "You pushed yourself," she said softly. Adrian gave a faint smile. "I needed to show Marcus that I am not finished." "You nearly collapsed during the third round of questions," she replied. "Do not pretend you did not feel it." He closed his eyes for a moment. "I felt it. But seeing you stand there, it gave me enough strength to get through the night." Mara looked away, her chest tightening in a way she did not expect. Compliments were not new to her, but this one felt different. More vulnerable. More true. The limousine rolled through the quiet night streets, the lights of Manhattan reflecting across the windows. Mara finally broke the silence. "How long have you known Marcus was involved in your daughter's death?" she asked. Adrian opened his eyes slowly. "I suspected the night it happened. But suspicion cannot break a man like him. Evidence can. That is why I need you." Mara nodded, her voice steady. I will get it. Adrian studied her for a long moment. You always speak like a soldier. Because it keeps me focused, she replied. If I let myself feel everything, I will not move forward. Something softened in his face. Then let me ask something outside the mission. Something human. She hesitated. Go ahead. Adrian shifted slightly, the effort costing him, but his voice remained calm. Do you ever allow yourself to rest? Mara blinked, taken off guard by the question. Rest is a weakness in my line of work. No, Adrian said, shaking his head lightly. Rest is a necessity. Especially for someone who carries as much weight as you do. She did not answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. I do not remember the last time I felt safe enough to rest. Adrian exhaled, a mix of sadness and understanding. Then maybe, he said, you should start here. The limousine turned into Hale Tower's private drive. The guards opened the gate as the vehicle slowed. Mara looked at Adrian with a deeper concern now. His breathing had become uneven, and sweat glistened faintly along his temples. Adrian, she said sharply, you need help. No hospital, he whispered. Just, help me upstairs. She moved instantly. By the time the limousine door opened, she was already supporting him, her arm steady around his waist. The night air was cool, but his body felt feverish against her. They reached the penthouse elevator. Adrian leaned against the wall, struggling to stay upright. Do not call the medical team, he murmured. If they see how weak I am, it will leak. Marcus will use it. Mara clenched her jaw. You are asking me to keep your condition a secret that could cost your life. I am asking you to trust me, he said. Her throat tightened again. Trust was not something she offered freely. Yet here she was, holding him up, protecting him even from his own vulnerability. When they reached his suite, she guided him to the bed and helped him sit. He winced as he lowered himself, pain flashing across his features. Mara hovered beside him. You should not have attended the gala. Not like this. Adrian looked up at her, his voice a low whisper. I had to. Because with you beside me, I felt like I had one more fight left. The word stayed between them, warm, fragile, and unguarded. For the first time since their arrangement began, Mara saw not the billionaire, not the employer, not the strategic partner, but a grieving father trying desperately to hold on to what little time he had left. And for the first time, she felt the armor around her heart shift. The morning after the gala arrived far too quickly. Hale Tower was unusually quiet, as if the building itself sensed the shift in danger. Mara had barely slept. She remained in the hallway outside Adrian's suite for hours, listening for any sign that his breathing had worsened. When dawn finally crept across the skyline, she stepped into the kitchen, intending to make coffee before checking on him again. But the silence broke abruptly. Her phone vibrated with a dozen messages at once. Then the screen lit up with a news alert. Billionaire Adrian Hale collapses at gala, wife's violent past exposed. Mara stared at the headline, the words blurring together like smoke. She opened the article. Her own photograph filled the top, pulled from an old security badge she had forgotten existed. The story listed details no one outside her former agency should have known: overseas missions, disciplinary reviews, fragments of classified assignments twisted into something sinister. And then the most damaging line of all, sources claim Mara Voss married Adrian Hale for inheritance rights, exploiting his terminal condition. Mara felt something cold slide down her spine. This was not a random leak. This was a calculated strike. She grabbed her phone and sprinted to Adrian's suite. Inside, Adrian sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the same article on his tablet. His expression was unreadable, calm, too calm. That was what worried her. Adrian, she said, this is Crow. He wants to break the contract. He wants the world to see me as a threat, so you cannot trust me. Adrian lifted his gaze slowly. He struck faster than expected. Then let me fix it, she said firmly. Give me the authority to shut this down. But Adrian remained still. His silence stretched too long. Finally, he spoke. Mara, these details about your past. Some of them. I did not know. Her breath caught. Does it matter? It matters if it puts you in danger, he replied. Mara stepped forward, anger tightening her voice. I am in danger because I chose to help you. I did not leak this. I did not betray you. I know you did not, Adrian said, but the hesitation in his tone was enough. She heard it sharply, like a cracking glass. Her jaw clenched. You think there is a possibility I did? I think, Adrian said carefully, that anyone capable of surviving the things you survived is also capable of making choices I cannot predict. The words hit harder than a physical blow. She had stood beside him. She had held him up in the elevator. She had kept his secret when he begged her not to call the medical team. She had taken the blow meant for him at the gala. And still, he doubted her. Mara stepped back. I see. Adrian moved to stand. Pain flickered across his face, but he pressed on. Mara, listen, no, she said quietly but firmly. You think my strength makes me dangerous. Marcus thinks it makes me disposable. And your legal team probably thinks it makes me a liability. Mara, I agreed to this marriage to protect your daughter's memory, she continued, her voice steady but colder than she intended. Not to become another pawn in a billionaire's fear. Adrian flinched at the word fear. She took a breath, trying to steady the rising hurt in her chest. I am going to find who leaked that file. But I will do it for myself. Not because of this contract. Before Adrian could respond, the door chimed. His head of corporate security entered without waiting for permission. His expression was tense. Sir, the board is demanding an emergency meeting. They want to review your medical condition and the legitimacy of your marriage. Adrian stiffened. Mara saw the trap closing from every side. Marcus had struck hard, and he had struck publicly. The board would turn on Adrian. The media would tear her apart. And Marcus would tighten the noose. Mara straightened. I will handle this. Adrian looked up at her, conflicted. You are walking straight into his line of fire. I have walked through worse, she said. The hurt between them remained unspoken, suspended in the air like a fragile thread. But the mission was still alive. The danger was rising. And the war for justice had officially begun. Hale Tower's boardroom sat like a glass fortress above the city, the morning sun slicing across the long conference table where 12 executives whispered anxiously. They had already seen the headlines. They had already smelled blood. When Adrian entered, leaning heavily on his cane, the room fell into a hush that felt more predatory than respectful. Mara walked in behind him, straight-backed. Expression unreadable. Every pair of eyes snapped toward her. Some filled with suspicion. Others with thinly veiled disdain. The chairman cleared his throat. Mr. Hale, the board has several concerns. Namely, your sudden marriage, your declining health, and the revelation of your wife's violent record. Mara did not flinch. Adrian lowered himself slowly into his seat. Mara Voss is my wife. That is not up for debate. The chairman's expression tightened. Your marriage could destabilize Hale Corporation. The shareholders fear a woman with her background could compromise security or influence succession. Succession. The word twisted like a knife. Adrian's fingers curled around his cane. Before he could respond, the doors burst open. A man strode in wearing an expensive suit and a smirk that perfectly matched the venom in his voice. Marcus Crow. Apologies, he said smoothly, but considering the urgent circumstances, I believe I have a right to be here. As a shareholder. Several board members exchanged glances. Marcus walked to the center of the room and placed a folder on the table with theatrical precision. Inside this file, he announced, is a report confirming Mara Voss was discharged from her agency for disobedience in the field. She has a history of using excessive force. She is unfit to be the wife of any executive, let alone a man in Mr. Hale's condition. Mara felt the heat rise in her chest, but she stayed silent. Marcus leaned closer to the board. If she remains at his side, the company's value will plummet. Adrian slammed his cane against the floor. Enough. But Marcus did not stop. Unless, of course, this marriage is a scheme. A play for inheritance. Gasps erupted around the table. Adrian gripped the table edge, trying to stand. His body betrayed him. The weakness hit fast. His vision blurred. He was collapsing. Mara moved first. She lunged across the room and caught him before his knees buckled. Her arm steadied him with a strength that silenced the entire boardroom. Adrian's breath shuddered, his face pale, pain carving into every line. "Adrian," she whispered, "breathe. Stay with me." And for a moment, he did, because she held him. Marcus's smirk faded. The chairman cleared his throat nervously. "We need to call medical." "No," Adrian rasped. "She stays." He looked at Mara, eyes glassy with pain and something deeper. "Do not leave." Mara's chest tightened. "I am right here." Marcus scoffed. "Touching. But that does not change the facts. She is dangerous. She is unstable." Mara turned slowly, her gaze icy and controlled. "You leaked my file. But you slipped." Marcus blinked. "What?" She held up her phone. Only someone with access to sealed federal archives could get these documents. That list has 3 names. 2 are dead. 1 is you. Board member shifted uncomfortably. Marcus's jaw tensed. "And one more thing," Mara said. "This photograph," she held up the image of her from her old security badge, "came from a terminal in the Department of Defense. The breach was flagged at 2:15 in the morning. The same time your private server in Manhattan went active." A ripple spread across the room. "Check the logs," Mara said. "Check every file transfer." Marcus Crowe broke into federal data. And he did it to destroy the man he murdered the daughter of. Silence. Then whispers. Then outrage. Board members reached for their phones. Lawyers took notes. Security officers entered to seize Marcus's laptop. Marcus's composure finally cracked. "You have no proof." Mara stepped forward. "Yes, I do." She handed the chairman a small flash drive. "The evidence your daughter collected," she said, turning to Adrian. "I found it. She was telling the truth. She was going to expose him." Adrian's breath hitched, pain, grief, and something like relief all crashing together. Marcus lurched forward in anger, but security grabbed him. "You cannot do this," he growled. "You do not know who you are dealing with." Mara's voice was steady. "Actually, Marcus, I know exactly who you are." The chairman turned to security. "Remove him from the building." As Marcus was dragged out, he shouted, "This is not over." But the board ignored him. Their eyes were on Mara now. The woman Marcus tried to destroy. The woman who just dismantled him in front of the entire board. Adrian looked up at her, voice barely above a whisper. "Mara, thank you." She steadied him again, her hand warm against his shoulder. "For your daughter," she said quietly. "Always." And for the first time since the contract began, something in Adrian's expression changed. Something unguarded. Something real. Security escorted Marcus out of Hale Tower that morning, but the echo of his rage lingered long after the doors closed. The board members quickly dispersed to contain the scandal and initiate a legal investigation, leaving the vast conference room eerily quiet. Only Adrian and Mara remained, standing together in the stillness of the moment that had nearly shattered everything. Adrian leaned heavily on the table as he caught his breath. Mara stepped closer, steadying him before he could fall. She guided him gently into the nearest chair, her movements firm but controlled. "You need rest," she said softly. He shook his head. "Not yet. Not until I say what I need to say." Mara pulled a chair beside him. The exhaustion in his face was unmistakable, but so was the clarity in his eyes. He looked at her with a steadiness she had not seen since the day they met. "I doubted you," Adrian said. "Even for a moment. And that doubt was a failure on my part." Mara said nothing, but her jaw tightened slightly. "I asked for your loyalty," he continued, "but I did not show you mine. That is not who I want to be. Not in the time I have left." Her voice was quiet, careful. "Adrian, you were under pressure. Marcus manipulated everything." "That does not excuse it," he said. "You protected me. You fought for my daughter. You put your name, your reputation, and your entire life at risk. And I repaid you with suspicion." Mara's breath caught, just slightly. Adrian reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. The marriage contract. The legal binding that had tied them together with rules, clauses, and obligations. He set it on the table between them. "Mara," he said, "I am ending the contract." She stared at him, startled. "What are you doing?" He slid the document toward her. "You are free. No obligations. No terms. No debt owed to me or my family." She frowned, confused. "Why?" "After everything we have done, because what you have given me cannot be written into a contract," he said. "You avenged my daughter. You restored my dignity. You reminded me that courage still exists in this world. This marriage began as strategy, but you turned it into something honorable." Mara's eyes lowered to the contract. The ink that once bound them now felt meaningless. Adrian exhaled slowly. "I do not want a wife who is tied to me by duty. I want a partner who chooses to be here. Not because it is written, but because it is real." She felt her chest tighten at the sincerity in his voice. For a long moment, the room stayed quiet. Then Mara reached out, lifted the contract, and tore it cleanly down the middle. The pieces fell like soft paper snow across the polished table. Adrian froze, surprised. "Mara," she met his eyes with steady resolve. "I did not stay because of the contract, Adrian. I stayed because I believed in your daughter. And somewhere along the way, I began to believe in you." The silence between them softened. Adrian's voice lowered. "Then stay. Not as my wife by contract, but as the woman I want to share whatever time I have left with." Mara placed her hand over his. "I am not going anywhere." Somewhere in the city below, sirens wailed and life rushed on, but inside the boardroom, everything felt still, warm, and certain. The danger had not vanished, but for the first time, the weight did not feel unbearable. Weeks later, when legal charges were filed against Marcus Crowe and Hale Corporation stabilized, Adrian and Mara held a small ceremony on the rooftop garden of Hale Tower. There were no cameras, no reporters, and no contracts, only the soft glow of string lights, the evening breeze, and the memory of the daughter Adrian had lost. Adrian slid a simple ring onto Mara's finger. "No more deals," he whispered. "Just us." Mara's voice was steady. "Just us." Their hands intertwined at the edge of the city skyline, no longer bound by obligation, but by something far stronger. A choice. And the promise of a life forged not from power or fear, but from justice, loyalty, and a love that had grown quietly in the shadows of grief and war.